What's going on, guys? Welcome to another session with Phrankleen. If it's your first time stopping by, thank you for doing so. Don't forget to like my video. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button if it's your cup of tea. When you do, smash the bell button, select the all option so you're notified when I upload the content like this or when I'm live streaming. Okay, right. For today's topic, I've talked about this for those who've been watching me for a minute. So this clip that I'm going to show you in a moment, it's a very interesting one from someone else's perspective, and I would like you to watch this. And after the video clip, I'll add my own take, and then we'll wrap up the video. So, but what I need to say very quickly is my emphasis on our inability, particularly within the African, diaspora and amongst us as Africans, inability to grow generational wealth, and the reasons behind that. How a lot of us grew up with emotional blackmail that you're required to do this, or even when you grow older, there's undue pressure on you to part with a chunk of your finance and all that. And what that ensures is it entraps people as they grow through life. You lack that financial springboard. You're trapped at the bottom end of the societal economic spectrum, and by so doing, for so many people, you end up passing on the cycle of poverty to your own children, and unbeknown to you, you may end up raising them with the same ugly values that were forced down your own lungs whilst you were going through your formative years, and also being as a young adult, and on goes the cycle of poverty within the Black community.
So there's a video circulating by a young lady, and she's talking about how most of us are no longer going to be sending money back home. And she's basically saying how we're speaking from a point of privilege and how we are losing our sense of community by doing so, in addition to some other points. She turned her stitches off, but I want to share my perspective. The reason why most of us are not going to be sending money back home the way our parents were doing is because the way our parents were doing it was not sustainable. It's not wrong to have a need, but it is not practical to rely on somebody to fund your life. Now, I'll always say this, when it comes to education and medical needs, I am more than willing to, finance a family member if my finances can accommodate it. When it comes to health and education, I can do it. Particularly education. Why? Because if I'm investing in somebody's education, I know that at a point they will be able to, support themselves and get a job. So the end goal is gonna help their own financial freedom. They're not gonna remain dependent on me for the rest of their life. But what is happening, and as we've seen from our parents, is that they keep sending money back home to people who are just waiting for our parents' money to be able to live life. That is just not appropriate. And let's think about it even critically. If you're to calculate the money that African parents have been sending back home versus the amount of money they're putting in their own children's education fund to go to college, yeah, crickets. There are certain things that just don't make sense. And I think that this generation of Africans, we're learning, or even immigrants, we're learning how to have boundaries. You cannot give somebody else life at the expense of your own. It's just not going to work. Basically, don't give a man a fish. Teach him how to fish so he can be independent. And I think that's what the scary part is. The people receiving money back home are not interested in becoming financially independent. They are more excited at the prospect of having somebody fund their lifestyle. That is not healthy. And I think that us saying no is completely in our right, because again, you are having African parents sending thousands of dollars back home to family members, yet their own kids, they don't even have a college fund for. Talk to any financial advisor and they're going to tell you that you don't have wisdom. You are financially illiterate by doing so. All in all, we are having boundaries, and that is going to annoy the people who want to be dependent on us, and that's not our problem.
Now, the points I need to add very quickly is I've always talked about this. You've got to learn to say no. And although this woman's, point of view, she's talking about how some of our, parents within the black community, how they send money back home, playing God, like I normally say it. They play God, they're sending out the best part of their resources over the years. They leave themselves hanging. They do so at the detriment of their own children, their own immediate family, wife and kids. And, sometimes women also do that. It's not gender specific. And the point here is when you are shelling money out, in truckloads on a monthly basis because of an imposed or self-adopted truckload of responsibility, you do yourself a major disservice financially. You deny your children of the sort of wealth-related springboard that they are meant to enjoy from you. You deprive yourself of even some of the things that you should have achieved with the application, proper application of your own resources. Resources, I mean your money, right? And the woman made a statement towards the end of that video clip where she talked about, if you ask any financial advisor, they would tell you that it doesn't make sense to be financially reckless. And I've been talking about this. So when Phrankleen says you've got to learn to say no to your family, I'm not here trying to create a hate group or asking you to despise family members, because I know, right? I'm a Nigerian by birth, and I understand, right, that in Africa, as much as we have rich culture and all that, we also have a chunk of our culture which I regard as toxic. Okay, people are raised with these very, very dangerous mental conditioning that's really deeply rooted in emotional blackmail, and you're raised in such a way whereby, so eventually, say your parents, I'm talking hypothetically now, send you abroad and stuff, you feel compelled. And that's not to say, oh, don't help. But a lot of people, because of the emotional blackmail and undue pressure, you're forced and compelled to send back a chunk of your money. I cannot count the number of emails that I've received over time since I've been doing my show on YouTube, where people are lamenting, people in their late 30s, mid 30s, early 40s, late 40s, even in their 50s and 60s, and where people look back into their journey and then they realize that, man, I could have built a house, I could have set up this business, I could have done more for my children, I could have set this aside towards my own retirement, but because they were busy playing God, they were victims of emotional blackmail. And it's even a lot difficult for most people if you have parents who are based back home at the center point of the so-called emotional blackmail. And like I said, what these ensures is you remain trapped at the bottom end of the societal economic spectrum. You cannot effectively compete with your counterparts, and particularly you can't do enough for yourself. I have a saying that you can't give what you don't have. So if I am not economically stable, right? If I'm not enjoying financial freedom, if I don't have any substantive assets in my name, so please tell me, how will I be able, right, to pass on helpful information, morals in that regard to my own children, right? How will I weaponize my children financially, both mentally and, lessons about life? How will I even, if I don't have any assets to my name, right, I'm struggling, I'm neck deep in debts and all of these nonsense, how will I be able to empower my own children, the next generation? How will I be able to even help my grandchildren? How will I be able to strengthen them or leave XYZ behind, or be able to create generational wealth? There is no sentiment involved. This, if you look in other communities, other races and stuff, they play this game of generational wealth. It's become a culture for them. They don't play with it. The Jewish community, if you look in the white community, the Asian community, Indian, name it, the Chinese, people, they are fixated on it. It's a way of life. They don't live a lifestyle of these crazy dependency on their children. Oh, XYZ is in Europe. Again, I'm saying, okay, you're the one who's managed to travel abroad in your family, and you have siblings back home or you have parents back home and stuff. But you see, the moment you allow yourself to be sucked into the vicious cycle of you have to give people money at your own detriment on a monthly basis, then what becomes of you? But unfortunately, like I keep saying, a lot of us come from backgrounds where they've applied religiosity as a sort of mental chain and weapon to clamp you down. Right from the formative years when you were a child, you've been robbed of critical thinking. You can't talk back. You're not allowed to challenge the thought process of adults, of older people around you generally, particularly within the context of most families within Africa. If you dare to challenge their thought process or say, oh, why is this way? You're regarded as being rude. You are regarded as rebellious. They would tell you that you're going to be cursed. Or in most cases, one of the very common emotional, blackmailing weapon within the black community is if you talk back or challenge their thought process, regardless of how mildly spoken you are, you'll be told that your own children will do exactly the same to you. So, and there is these mental conditioning that a lot of people are in fact afraid. They have great minds. They disagree with a lot of the toxicity that I'm highlighting, but they are afraid to speak up to say no. They are afraid to look at people in the face and say no. I do not want this. I'm not conforming. So they would rather just bend over and allow those people to have their way with them. And for the most part, in plenty of cases and stories that I've shared on my channel, especially within the black community, you find people, particularly within our African communities, people that are based outside the confines of the diaspora. Diasporans, they see diasporans, African diasporans, most people, especially families and friends back home, most of them, they see you as mugs. They see you as financial springboard. They subject you to never-ending cycle of manipulation, financial manipulation, emotional blackmail. They don't care. Excuse me. There is no empathy. Oh, I've got to work 2 jobs. Oh, I've got this truckload of monthly outgoings. They don't care. What can I get from this individual? How can I get more money? What sort of lies can I break into? So if they see that, some of them see that you're trying to build for yourself, you're trying to even make effort, they will stifle it because all they ever want is to fleece you to death. So my question is, on the final note, how long for? How long are we going to carry on like this? I've seen plenty of people on my channel, previous videos, live stream, people talk about, we've got to do better. We've got to do better. The implementation of all these ideas and all this submission is the problem. I've realized that so many people are afraid. You've got to, learn to find that confidence like I did a very long time ago. And you've got to beat your mom, your dad, your uncle, whatever. You've got to learn to say no. You've got to learn to just put a stop and say no. Stop giving away your resources. The lady said in the video, on the final note, talked about how some of the African parents, right, they don't even, when time for college comes, they don't even have the college funds to send their own children to college. Do you know why? All the time, whilst they should have been setting aside college funds and all the necessary resources to support their biological children, they've been busy playing God. So now there comes a time to support their own biological children. Accordingly, they become broke, and then they make all sorts of excuses. They quickly give up, and then they just push it to you now that you've got to learn how to raise yourself. And for the most part, if you come from an environment where you have no knowledge of the outside world, you have no financial knowledge, investment knowledge, how to build wealth, you will find out that most people grow up, you go through your 20s, your 30s, your 40s, even your 50s and more. Without this knowledge, you make a lot of blunder, you make poor decisions around finance. And then what happens? Your children carry on in that pathway. Anyway, that's me done. What do you think? Let's keep that conversation going on below. Follow me on Instagram at Phrankleen, as it's spelled on my YouTube channel. And I will most definitely catch you in the very next one. Peace.